I don't know if I deserve a bit of sympathy. Save your sympathy, that's alright with me. I was satisfied to drift along from day to day, till you came and took my man away. Remember my forgotten man. You put a rifle in his hand. You sent him far away. He shouted hip hooray. But look at him today. Remember my forgotten man. You had him cultivate the land. The sweat fell from his brow. He walked behind a plow. But look at him right now.
Let's highlight how unquestioned hypernationalism and blind patriotism contributes to misandry and the destruction of men. Now, we must remember that if we define misandry as the hatred of men and boys, then we must also come to terms with the fact that misandry can come from men just like it can come from women. So it's up to us to describe and expose the hero worship of the military common in the so-called pro-men conservative circles. Even though something this blatantly apparent shouldn't need explaining, the damage that war does to men and boys, and how women are content to sit back and let us die for the protection of the female herd and the playground they've turned Western civilization into. Men in the West, and specifically in America, have been told since 9/11 that we're at war with generalized catchphrases like radical Islam and terrorists and extremists. But the truth is that this isn't a war, but it's a prolonged exercise in male hatred where men from a vastly more powerful nation are flown over to another nation and told to shoot at and get shot at by other men for their country. Now I say men because, as we all know, it's only men who are doing the killing and being killed. I mean, we have yet to see female battalions being used as cannon fodder, and the inequality shown in the massive difference between male and female deaths is not up for interpretation, it's merely a fact. Last I checked, there was 82 women that have died since the beginning of the Iraq War compared to the thousands of men who've lost their lives. Now, apparently the US government and the military is quite concerned with inequality in the military, considering the ferocity and fervor with which they forced the repealing of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But for some reason, the incredibly uneven frequency with which men are being killed in defense of their country compared with women doesn't seem to be quite as important, with the desire to make the military equal for all. Homosexuals can now serve openly in the military, where men are still expected to carry the weight of females, where the cost of these burdens are usually life, limb, or sanity. And for the men who actually make it back home and don't die in these wars, don't worry, America has some very special treats for you, ranging from homelessness, post-traumatic stress disorder, psychosis, medical neglect, alcohol and drug addiction, adulterous wives. You have a veritable buffet of misery and suffering awaiting your servitude. And yet we still consider fighting for our country an honorable endeavor, when our country hasn't fought for us for decades. And it's precisely this blind faith in America worship that compels men to extinguish themselves for their country, while their wives get to have a good cry about it at your burial and go on with the rest of their lives, eventually meeting another man who wasn't stupid enough to fall for this patriotism at all costs nonsense. I mean, it's amazing. These conservative country worshiping types say that you should appreciate all the rights that you have in America and accept the good along with the bad, without ever realizing that the bad, the warmongering and the misandry, is the exact reason our rights in America are disappearing under our very noses. I call it patriotic complacency, the ability to overlook the most atrociously morally unacceptable acts of subjugation and hypocrisy just because we have convinced ourselves that we here in the West are the pinnacle of morality and freedom. Don't question the state. You have it good here. America's the greatest country on earth. Like it or leave it, etc., etc. Meanwhile, men are the only ones expected to upkeep America's so-called greatness, and women are the only ones that seem to be enjoying it. These morons, these conservative types, should all be shipped off to fight in the wars that they routinely condemn men to. They should also encourage their sons and daughters to sign up and fight in the military, and they should be given the same pitiful compensation when they come back in coffins, or with amputated legs and arms, or when they end up homeless and addicted to painkillers and antidepressants because they can't get the horrible things they had to do to survive out of their heads, and because they know that they've taken part in a thinly veiled, red, white, and blue exercise in pure evil. Overzealous nationalistic pride has been employed throughout history as a hidden form of misandry. I mean, we saw Hitler, upon realizing that his men had been decimated and that the German fatherland was facing inevitable demise, conscript boys and elderly men to make Germany's pitiful last stand against the Allied forces. And we saw in the Congo and Rwanda thousands of boys conscripted to fight for the so-called democratic armed forces, Time and time again, throughout history, we see the subtle shaming language of patriotism used to conscript, draft, and persuade men to inflict harm on other men or to be killed by other men. The fact is that this isn't an honor, it's suicide. It's the Pied Piper of misdirected patriotism leading impressionable 18-year-old American men like so many lemmings over the cliff. It exposes the very misandry that these so-called patriots refuse to name and forces us to confront the question that we all know needs to be asked. And that question is this: what benefit are American men receiving from their benevolent country and military that claims to appreciate them so much? What will a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis reveal about the male military service experience here in America? Well, we do know that the military does pay for an education, and it does give some benefits to its soldiers in the form of GI Bills and VA hospitals and so on and so forth. But these benefits are given to female soldiers also, which simply do not get injured or die anywhere near as often as men do. We know of the American female soldiers' propensity for getting pregnant immediately preceding deployment to avoid going to war. We know that men who refuse deployment are unceremoniously court-martialed and imprisoned. We know that in many instances, military divorce and child support laws are even more severe than the civilian courts. And that helps to facilitate the illegal activities of alimony-hungry women who slingshot from man to man in the military, depleting the funds of unlucky deployed soldiers who are even less prepared for adulterous, money-hungry, parasitic females than they are for the war effort paying their salary. Now ask yourself, am I making this up? Am I? Is what I'm saying not true? Of course it's true. So what benefit unique to men is the military providing to men? I want to know. Now, I harbor no ill will towards American veterans of war. What I reserve for them is pity. The truth is very few of them know the true extent of the deception they've been fed, and all of them, in continuing to fight for a country that by design saw only a few hundred women die in the Second World War, Vietnam, and the War on Terror combined, all of them have taken part in sustained misandry, whether they realize it or not. But what's done is done, and it can't be changed. What can be changed, however, is the American man's attitude towards the servitude of his country, and the targeting of any and all agendas, whether they come from men or females, that promote war and warmongering as male-friendly, honorable, or masculine undertakings. And this includes the exposition of so-called patriots, conservative white knights, and war on terror supporters who are interested in your Republican votes and your bodies as a weapon of the war instead of ending misandry. These charlatans are deeply entrenched in the men's movement, and they need to be identified, smoked out of their holes, and extricated from any movement interested in ending misandry. Their intentions simply do not correlate with freedom for men. Despite their pronouncements of being pro-men, they support wars that only kill men. Despite their pronouncements of being fiscally responsible, they support a war effort that has cost the American taxpayers, which are predominantly male, over $1 trillion since 2003. They are incompetent, disingenuous, fictitious hypocrites that hide their own immense naivete behind their equally hypocritical liberal counterparts in government. They see their half of the irreparable American political infrastructure as being completely competent, well-wishing, and innocent, and invoke convenient, double-thinking bouts of selective memory and amnesia when their party shows their true colors and their true opinions of men and male expendability when wars need fighting or healthcare bills for 9/11 first responders visit the Senate. And this is why I'm taking this specific time to tell them all about themselves. And I also issue a challenge to so-called conservative MRAs that spend more time asking men to join the Republican Party than they do addressing misandry to post videos and refute my claims that I'm making here in this video. And let me be specific. I'm not asking for a comparative, lesser of two evil analysis of the Democratic and Republican parties. I've documented repeatedly the uselessness of the Democratic Party. I want a rebuttal to my points or the immediate cessation of any so-called MRA stumping for the Republican Party. It's time that you defend your party's supposed pro-male stance or simply shut the fuck up. I will target you types, and I will do so because I know exactly what you want and what you're doing, and that is the dilution of our message and the legitimization of your preferred dysfunctional side of the spectrum of American government. I want you to understand why obsessive nationalism can and has been used for evil in America. I want to give you an example so you can see for yourself what happens when you decide to serve your country. Now, during the Great Depression, You had tens of thousands of World War I veterans marching on Washington, and their main demand was that the World War Adjusted Compensation Act entitled them to payment for lost wages that they would have collected had they not been fighting for their country in World War I. Now, the wages were not to be collected until 1945, but they needed it at that point in time in 1932 to combat the poverty of the Great Depression. So they marched on Washington and demanded payment. Now, after a scuffle between police and veterans who called themselves the Bonus Army, in which 2 veterans were shot and killed by police, President Hoover then ordered the forcible evacuation of these veterans. Then, 2 men that the America worshippers I've mentioned earlier elevate to near godhood, Douglas MacArthur and George S. Patton, charged the veterans with tanks and infantry and proceeded to gas them as well, forcing the veterans to their main camp, prompting President Hoover to command Douglas to halt his advance, to which Douglas refused, citing that he could not be bothered to halt his attack. And this is how America really views its veterans, with contempt, with ridicule, and as an enemy.
The cavalrymen, one of whom is Major Patton, have got their sabers out.
The soldiers donned gas masks and without warning began hurling gas grenades at the veterans. The troops advanced, some jabbing with bayonets.
The tear gas was just burning my face. I was trailing behind my dad, and he kept hollering, "Come on, boy, come on, boy."
Marchers were choking from the gas, just like the battlefields in France.
And so they're being forced out of their shacks by smoke bombs and tear gas, hurled by the troops who have been called out by the President of the United States.
Chief Glassford stood by helplessly.
The veterans did not believe the country for which they had fought would ignore the plight into which the Depression had placed them. Many did not believe that United States troops would take the field against them.
By early evening, most of the marchers had been driven across a drawbridge that led to their main camp.
The president does not want MacArthur to cross the bridge, and MacArthur disregards the order. Eisenhower later says that he saw this happen. MacArthur says, "I cannot bother with pieces of paper during a military operation." And so he crosses the bridge.
All through the camp were scenes of panic.
My dad says, "Let's get the hell out of here. The soldiers are going to kill us."
Then troops began to set fire to their wooden shacks. One reporter wrote, "The blaze was so big it lit the whole sky. A nightmare come to life." The president looked out a window of the White House in the direction of the fire, then retired for the night.
And the roaring flames sound the death knell to the fantastic Bonus Army that ends so disastrously in the shadow of the capital of the United States of America.
Now, I welcome all of those watching to watch this documentary, March of the Bonus Army, that I've put in the description box, and educate yourselves about what was done to these poverty-stricken veterans by America and your so-called American military heroes. Men need to wake the fuck up. This military warship bullshit has to stop, and it has to stop now. I've never seen a Muslim peasant farmer in Afghanistan accuse an American man of false rape. I've never seen him steal everything he had in feminized court systems. And I've never seen him file false domestic violence accusations. The true enemy of Americans, and more specifically American men, is America itself. The welfare, warfare, nanny state, military-obsessed, warmongering, nation-building behemoth that America has become. It is the true oppressor of Western men, of all races and creeds. We are way past politics. That's all I really got to say for now.